Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Tanveer Naseer. I'll tell you all about Tanveer in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert toward others. And when you do it from a leadership standpoint, as you will definitely discover that Tanveer is, you do it with the purpose of bringing people together for common cause. Tanveer Naseer, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Thank you very much, John. Pleasure to be here with you.
Great. I want to tell folks a little bit about you. Tanveer Naseer is an internationally acclaimed keynote speaker, award-winning leadership author. He's also the founder of a company, Tanveer Naseer Leadership, and he does a lot of corporate training. He's based in Montreal, and he does it in his native Canada, as well as all over the U.S. His work has been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, Inc., and many other places. You've won many awards, including Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership and management experts. You're very active. You are a much in demand speaker, and you've worked for, name a company, you have spoken to them. So anyway, Tanveer, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
It's so nice to again talk to you again, John, after having you on my podcast. So I know we're going to have a great conversation here.
Absolutely. Your book, I have to know, is called Leadership Vertigo. So I'm holding it onto my desk so I don't tip over. Where did the title come from, and what is your reference, Tanveer?
So it came from this understanding that, a lot of times when we think of vertigo, we think about it as being this really obvious visual response that was inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. But it actually refers to this neurological mechanism that happens where our brain sends us a false signal telling us that we're moving in a certain direction, whereas our eyes and our other senses are telling us, no, we're moving in another direction. So it creates this state of confusion and dizziness because we're not sure what to believe. And so that's where the idea of leadership vertigo comes across, because in my work, I've found a lot of leaders that were having this gap in perception between how they view their leadership and how their employees experience it. And I'm sure, John, you've had that thing where, you'll go give a keynote at some conference and so forth. One of the more senior leaders will come across saying, "Oh, John, this is such a great talk. I really appreciate hearing from you. You validated a lot of what I do." And then some of his coworkers will come along shaking their heads going, he's the one who needed it the most. It's frustrating to hear that he thinks he's doing this stuff when he's not. And that's what leadership vertigo refers to.
That's powerful. And I love how you focus on the concept of the gap, because we portray ourselves in our minds, what we are doing, but what really matters, particularly from a leadership standpoint, is that perception. Are we connecting with others? And, what you just addressed is the blind spot, and we all have it. And I think the challenge is to recognize it and then do something about it, which is first step, read your book, Leadership Vertigo, but be conscious of it and then resolve to make a positive action. What's your take on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things we have to realize, we hear about it a lot. We're learning a lot about all these different cognitive biases we have, right? Which a lot of times when I give keynotes about my book, I tell people, look, you have to understand this is not you, it's your brain. Your brain's a cognitive miser. It doesn't want to use up a lot of the energy, which is a rarely finite amount it has per day. So it tries to find shortcuts. Best example I always give people is if you think about your regular commute to work, you don't think about, okay, at the next stop, I turn left and then I go 2 blocks, then turn right. You're thinking about other stuff. Why? Because your brain has told you, look, this is mundane. I don't have to worry about and think about this. And that's fine on your commute. But the problem happens is if you go into a meeting and the people around the table, it's these people around the table. And if your brain convinces you it's always the same thing, now you're missing out on key data, on key insights of what people are really trying to tell you that you should be paying attention to, because your brain is convincing you already know what to expect in that interaction.
That is such a powerful insight. And I know it happens to people I know, including me. So we go in with our preconceptions, and this is going to be about that. And we may miss something entirely. And it's good that you're focusing on this topic. Now, one of the avenues I think that you say of breaking through this is the topic of the concept, the attribute of empathy. How does that work in a leadership context, Tanveer? So.
So we all understand the basic concept of empathy as being this idea of walking in someone else's shoes. The challenge we're seeing now is that we're making empathy conditional, right? We're seeing a very much this growing notion of tribalism, right? Are you in my in group? Are you my out group? And when we first make that decision, then we decide whether to exude empathy, which is, again, to understand here, when we talk about empathy, we're not talking that I have to agree with you or that I have to say, yes, I can appreciate why you feel that way. No, it's to leave ourselves open to saying, I want to understand your reality. It's not a matter of me agreeing or disagreeing. It's just understanding. That's it. It's a non-judgmental perspective. But see, the problem I see right now, and this is what's widening the leadership gap, is that we are starting to treat empathy as something that's conditional. Because again, here's where our brain comes into play. Our brain takes any piece of information before we even have a chance to process it and says to it, is this a threat or is this a reward? Right. And so what we've been starting to be trained through social media is to think of empathy in that context. Is this a threat or reward? Is this person worthy of my empathy, or are they worthy of my recriminations and so forth? And so this is where we have to be more attentive to empathy in leadership, because again, it's going to create a gap because you're not willing to hear the person, again, not to agree, but to understand, so you can better provide them with the context, maybe for why a decision's being made, why a choice is being made, so that they can be better integrated and part of the team and saying, okay, I understand why we're going in this direction.
As you were talking about this narrowing kind of, it reminded me, and once upon a time I worked in marketing communications. And so I was very much working in the area of branding. And, just take a supermarket example, we condition ourselves to the brands that we want. And so we just zero in on that and just focus on everything. And I think it probably goes back to our original habits as humans, is fight or flight. Is this good or is this bad? That type of thing. So if I'm in a leader, or just all of us, how do we cut through the clutter, but make it more honest and have that understanding that is so important?
So in my book, when I talk about empathy, I talk about this notion of how it helps us overcome those bouts of leadership vertigo, narrowing the gap, by combining it in the context of cultivating our compassion. And the way we do that is by taking our empathy and pairing it with something else we all have an innate ability to exhibit, and that's curiosity. And I know a lot of people will think, well, curiosity, that's something more I had when I was a child. And I tell people, how many shows do you watch that end, even if it's streamed, that ends on a cliffhanger, right? Do you keep watching, right? We see those little fun things. Are you still watching prompts, right? The reason for this is because the programmers, the story writers, they know, look, you're going to be curious. I got to tap into that. You want to know what's going to happen next. And think about games you play on your phone. Same thing. They learned how to keep you curious to know what's going to happen in the next level. What's the next challenge I have to overcome? So we all have curiosity. We're just not applying it in terms of our leadership. So when it comes to empathy, what we got to do is say, okay, I got to remove this conditional notion I have about it, and instead start with curiosity. I want to understand what the person's issues are. What are their concerns? Why is there a worry about this idea that we're putting forth? And then use your empathy to not judge it, but just try to understand where they're coming from.
Now, I know in your book, Leadership Vertigo, that you use, I'll paraphrase my own phrasing of this, is that empathy is the first step. From a leadership standpoint, you need to take it to the next level, and that's compassion. So tell us about how compassion has a role to play in leadership.
So we hear a lot these days about the importance of empathy in leadership, which it is, because again, like I said, it's about understanding the realities your employees face. Where compassion comes into play is that now we're going to do something about it. I mean, you've seen all the studies, John, where 80% of leaders will say they're really good listeners, their team really feels they're heard and understood, and yet 40% of employees say no. My boss is not, like, our 4% will say that our boss is a good listener, which means 60% say I have a boss who doesn't listen to me at all. So cultivating our compassion here is about taking that empathy, taking that curiosity and saying, okay, I'm assigning a task. Someone is having a challenge. Someone's at risk of burnout. Someone's feeling anxiety. How do I help them address it? I might not be able to resolve it. There might be a project we have to do that's being put on a deadline. It's being externally decided by, not by myself, by a higher up leadership, or maybe by the client. But how can I help you mitigate that anxiety? What are the resources? What's the support I can provide you? And that's what compassion does, where we're not just telling them, like, look, we all got our own burden to carry, so you just got to carry yours. No, it's how can I, as a leader, figure a way to help you lessen that load while still making sure you reach your objectives.
No, that's important. And I'm glad you, when I think of compassion, I always think of it in a larger context of helping, certainly, but maybe outside of work rather than inside of work. And I liked how you phrased it within the workplace. How I see someone struggling with an issue, so I'm going to help them. Or I see someone on the verge of burnout, so what can I do? Those are very tangible actions that a boss can act upon. Am I correct, Tanveer? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, think of it this way. If you had some machinery that you're responsible for, maybe you're manufacturing, and the little warning light goes off, you're not going to ignore it. You're going to realize that if we don't take care of this, the machine will break down. That's an unexpected expense plus an unexpected loss in productivity. So you're going to want to address it. So what our compassion does is it allows us to use our curiosity and empathy to spot that red light flashing that tells us that this employee needs some sort of attention, needs some sort of support. And again, this isn't about like, well, I'm not a therapist and so forth. You're not supposed to be. I mean, I've talked to my leaders who say, like, I don't know how to be a therapist. I'm like, well, that's not your job. You're a leader. You're not supposed to. If your employee needs a therapist, all you could do is say, like, look, we'll help you, get the time to see someone, but that's not my job. But my job is to make sure I'm providing you with the environment so that you can succeed. And if there's something that's impeding it, what is there within my ability to help resolve it? And even if there's not, just the mere acknowledgement speaks volumes, because then the person doesn't feel like they're in it alone, that no one cares about the weight and the challenges I face, but someone is aware and is saying, like, look, we're going to do our best to help offset this. Whenever there's another task that you usually do, we'll try to reassign it just so that you can get this high priority work done. That speaks volumes to your employees.
right, and that's a form of compassion, and I'm glad. And also, just kind of as a sidebar, you talked about a pushback. Well, I'm not a therapist, and you explained that that's not your role. But there is a role in when it gets to a mental health issue to make it safe for people to seek help. And so, I mean, what are the resources in the workplace? I, as your leader, don't need to know anything you don't want to share with me, but I'm here to help you navigate something. And that is a form of compassion. So I'm not meddling, I'm providing an opportunity for you to seek help in a non-judgmental way. Do you agree with that? So
100%. I mean, John, you've probably seen it on various social media channels where we'll all share these inspiring ideas that if you fall down, it's just an opportunity for you to get back up. Well, the thing is, as a leader, your job is not to help your employee get back up, because sometimes, yes, it is, because you can, but sometimes the challenge they face in getting back up is outside your scope. But at least you can acknowledge they fall down, and here, I'm going to help provide you with the resources that will help you get back up. And when you're back up, I'm going to make sure that when you come back in, that we're giving you a nice soft landing to get back in there, to start the ball rolling, get those quick wins, build your momentum, and then get that sense of courage. You know what? I'm back. I got this. And then off you go.
Great.
That's something every leader can do.
And that's powerful. And I think that leads us right into the next topic, which you address. And it's something that I talk about in my book, Grace Under Pressure. And you and I spoke about it on your podcast. Thank you for inviting me. And that's the sense of community. I like to say that a workplace can be community. What do you say about that, Tanveer? So.
Well, one of the things that we all have to understand, and something, again, I share in some of my workshops, is that we all have 3 core psychological needs. And one of those core psychological needs is a sense of belonging. And ironically, when we talk about all this divisiveness that we see, and it's not just in the political arena, it's in almost every arena, even in the entertainment. If fans of a particular genre, there's like divisions there too, right? The funny, ironic thing about this is that people say, oh my God, I can't believe how we're so divided. But it's a longing for belonging. That's what we're all feeling. We all feel a lack of belonging. And so we're just looking for somewhere where we feel like we can belong, fit in, and find people who agree with us or also see what we want to accomplish or what we want to be a part of. And as an organization, this is mission critical for you to have, right? We don't want, I mean, we hear all these terms of quiet quitting, the lazy girl work and so forth, and we think, oh, this is so frustrating. Well, honestly, this is a lack of leadership that's driving this because people don't feel a sense of belonging. I know what I'm responsible to do. I know what output I have to put out, but why does this matter? Right? What's the bigger part I'm connected to? How is this making things better? However you want to define that. Maybe we're making a better product or service for our customers. Maybe we're helping to address some of the environmental or social issues facing our country or our part of the world. Whatever it is, people want to feel that sense of belonging, that they're part of something bigger than themselves and what they do matters. And when you do that, you don't have to worry about all these issues because your employees are not coming in with those attitudes because they know the work they do here matters. And I am self-motivated to deliver my best because I care about this work. You don't have to make me care about it. I intrinsically care about it. And so this is why, as leaders, we have to think, are we creating a sense of community? It's not to be confused with, oh, we're all a family here. Okay. That's not what you're after. It's creating this idea of a vision that inspires people to say, I want to help make that future a reality. And I see a part I can play in making that happen because you're allowing me to be one of the writers of that narrative, of creating that story.
Right. That's a powerful explanation. I like that. But there's something intrinsic too, and I believe in the sense of community. Yes, there is agreement, but there is also dissent. And so we can disagree and we should. Otherwise, that community veers into becoming a cult. And so we want people to think and we want to embrace difference. We want to, and that comes into the concept of inclusion, of actually giving people a seat at the table, if you will, within the relative circumstance of where they are in the organizational structure. What's your take on that, Tanveer? So, yeah.
Yeah, this is an excellent point because, again, there's something else that we're all starting to get an avoidance of conflict. Like we think conflict is inherently bad. And it's just like emotions. Like, look, your emotions are not bad. It's what you do because of your emotions that is either good or bad. It's the same with conflict. If you're having an idea that, look, we want to break into this new market and we're trying to brainstorm ideas, and there are some people who are presenting this idea, we should go after this part of the market. And another group is saying, no, we should go after this one. That conflict is not bad if both of you are coming from the same vantage point of, we want the company to grow. We believe in the product service we offer and can make a difference. And we want to expand the number of people who benefit from it. So if we're coming from that, that's a positive initiative. That's something where you're trying to do good. So if you're both coming in from different angles, again, let's go back to what we're talking about, compassion and with empathy and curiosity. Take a step back. Okay, so why are they pushing for their thing? What is it about what they're presenting that actually is better than mine? What are the things about mine that they're showing out that I hadn't thought of consideration? And be honest, because the idea is not to tie yourself to the idea. Your idea is to tie yourself to why we do what we do, which is the larger vision. And from that context, I don't care which idea goes, whether it's my idea or yours. I just care that ultimately the idea we pick is what's going to ensure that we are successful collectively in achieving that larger vision that makes us feel like we're part of this larger community.
Absolutely. I like how you weave in the idea of compassion with understanding another's point of view. And sometimes your idea will be the one selected for an initiative, another mine. But at least we have a commonality. We have a sense of belonging because we have shared values and shared mission. I think that's what it comes down to. Now, you talk about in your book, Leadership Vertigo, the concept of delegation, which is sometimes critical. I want to tie it into the topic of burnout because leaders are always pushing themselves out there and self-care is seldom a top priority and to their own detriment. And I know sometimes some of that, being on all of the time or being at work might stem from a concept of ego, which means they can't do without me. So if you hear that, Tanveer, what's your advice? What do you suggest?
Well, I always tell leaders, like, look, your job is not only to help your team succeed, but to eventually succeed without you, which is why a lot of your employees should ultimately want to leave your team to go on to greener pastures. And I've had leaders who say to me, yeah, but I can't afford. Like, look, Tanver, there is there's not a lack of talented pool that we have to access. So if you're telling me to encourage my employees to grow beyond me and to go leave, how am I going to replace them? And I'm like, look, if you develop a reputation in your organization, in your industry, as a person who grows people, where they suddenly become successors in their own right, in whatever way they want to define it, whether it's becoming a leader in their own right or becoming the name in your industry for this type of technical expertise, you're going to be a talent magnet. People are going to want to come because they know here's somebody who's not just invested in making sure they look good, they're invested in making their employees look good. So you're going to be the one who's actually going to have to push talent away because you're going to have too many people wanting to come and be a part of your team that you're going to be able to say, well, look, I can't, but here's someone else who is looking for somebody. And then guess what? Now you're becoming like the star of your entire organization because not only are you attracting talent, but you're helping to find places to place that talent to help them grow. So again, this is one of these things where when we think about delegation and the idea of leadership and, my ego, I want to make sure people feel like I'm irreplaceable. Your irreplaceability comes not from what you know, but how you're able to develop and grow the talent within you, because that's something that's a unique skill that most leaders don't do. And even if there's another leader in your organization who does it, the thing is you all approach it differently. So some people are going to do better under your care than the other leader. So you don't have to worry about, well, this means my employee is going to outshine me. Like, that's the goal. You want them to outshine you because when they outshine you, everyone's going to be looking at your team going, how come all his employees are star players? I want to be a part of that team. So you're never going to have to worry about being no longer a leadership position. If anything, you're just going to have to worry about the floodgates that you're going to be having to try to keep closed.
Being a talent magnet is a positive thing, and it's going to help your career too. But more importantly, and I'm glad you emphasized this because so much of leadership is about elevating others. And when you're known as that person who can enable people to succeed and move up or fulfill their own potential within their own organization, that's only a positive. That's good for you. That's good for the team. That's good for them, and it's good for the organization. So it's a win-win all the time. So one of the challenges that we're facing now is the great unknown, and two initials, AI. So is AI going to play a role in leadership, Tanveer?
No, I don't think so. Because you want to know why? Because of everything we've just been talking about. We've been talking about compassion and how it's centered around empathy and curiosity. We've talked about developing people where you see their unique strengths and how you develop them and help them become better. AI can't accomplish that because AI lacks a soul. It doesn't have a means for us to feel a sense of belonging. Like, look, I love using my computers. I love being able to use it to do my podcast, to be able to develop my talks and so forth. But it doesn't foster a sense of community or belonging, right? But when I go to these organizations and I give these talks and I give these workshops and I see the energy that rises over the course of that keynote or that workshop, I feel that sense of community belonging. That didn't come from my computer. That came from me reinforcing to these leaders what it is they need to do to bring out the best in those they lead. And that's why we don't have to worry about AI taking away leadership. If anything, AI is forcing us to realize we have to be more human, right? We can't be taskmasters. Because the AI, if you want to be a taskmaster, then yes, be worried about AI because AI is coming for your job. But if you want to be a human-centric leader where your focus is on how do I rally people, how do I attract people who believe in this vision, who want to be part of this community, who see that I'm invested in their growth and success, that I'm going to be caring about their well-being because if they're well, they will succeed in this role, and then let them go off into doing their next great adventure and only to make a space for someone else to come join my team. AI is not on your radar because AI is only a tool that's going to help you do your job better.
Right. And that's, I love how you frame that. And it really gets down to some of the universal truths about leadership as it's about, and I think it links into community. The essence of community is really connection. So how do leaders foster a stronger connection, Tanveer, to their colleagues? So,
well, it's an easy thing I can tell people they can start doing right now the minute they finish watching this show, and that is to show up intentionally. And by that, I mean, when you walk into a meeting or you walk into a conversation, quiet your mind. Don't be like, okay, look, I have this email I got to do. Oh, I'm going to be talking to John later today, so I got to prepare for that and so forth. No, be fully present so that you see and hear what the person in front of you is saying, that you're picking up on those nonverbal cues that are going to make you realize, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. There's some other issue that maybe they want to talk to me about. And maybe we need to go in a quiet space so they can have a private conversation to share their concerns with me. So that's how we build relationships. We show people like, look, I am so invested in you that I am going to focus solely on you. I mean, one of the best leaders that I know everyone who's in leadership, we all appreciate is Nelson Mandela. And when he passed away, one of the things I loved in all the tributes, there was this common thread that everyone said, when you were talking to Nelson Mandela, he made you feel like you were the only person in the room. And it didn't matter if you were the Prime Minister of Great Britain or a waiter at a restaurant. That was the kind of power he had. But it's a simple power that all of us have, where it's just saying, look, I'm going to focus on the person right in front of me. I'm not going to focus on my smartphone. I'm not going to focus on what my brain's trying to get me to think about in terms of my to-do list, but on the person right in front of me, because that person in this moment is the single most important thing. And when you do that, you're going to be fostering connections. And if you do it consistently, now you're not just making a connection, now you're building a relationship.
That's a great insight. And I think you are now the first guest I've had in well over 200 who has actually preempted my question that I ask every guest, is a story about grace. And you said, and show up with intention. And that is a moment of grace. Is there something else you want to elaborate on that, Tanveer? So a story about grace.
Oh, yeah. I do have. I've watched a few of your shows, so I know you like telling with a story of grace. I actually have a great story of grace because it's about a failure of mine in one of my roles as a leader, where when I started leading this team, it was a bunch of non-technical employees in a scientific company, biomedical company. And my goal when I first started was I want to make sure my team understands everything that's going on, even the stuff that's not relative to them, but in a way that they would easily understand. They would get it, And the first few weeks, oh my God, it was like truly a honeymoon period. I loved working for them and they loved working with me. And it was fantastic. But then a few months into my role, one of the directors, who was a good friend at the time and also someone who I considered a mentor, he'd been there for 20 plus years, calls me into his office and says, Tanveer, I just want to have a conversation with you. And I need you to take this with the best of intentions, like really take this to heart. He says to me that one of your employees came to see me and they're feeling frustrated about the conversations they're having with you. And I'm like, really? I said, okay. And I was like, willing to hear it. But the first thing I thought was, okay, but why are they coming and telling you this? And they said, like, look, the thing is, first of all, let me tell you what the problem is. Before, it felt like you would have these conversations with them. You would take the time to sit and talk with them and listen to them and so forth. Now you're coming in, you're telling them stuff, but then you leave. You don't wait to hear what they have to say. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was doing that. And I said, okay. And then the director says, now let me get to your question. Yes, it's a bit odd that they came to me, but honestly, I've never seen this. And it's because they have such loyalty to you. They don't want to let you down. And he came to me saying, I don't know how to have this conversation with Tanveer without him feeling like he's a bad leader, that it's going to take the wind out of his sail. Because we've never worked for a guy like this, and I want him to keep doing, but he's kind of not doing the way he was at the start. And then I said to him, let me talk to him because I'll know how to bring this across to him. And he says to me, Tanveer, you've only been here working for them for a few months. You've instilled such loyalty. Please make sure you're communicating with the way you were before, because you're clearly an exceptional leader. Now, the period of grace here is that they could have gone to HR and filed a complaint, right? But they didn't want to do that. Why? Because they saw my potential as a leader. They saw how I was making them feel valued, and they didn't want to lose that. So they said, I don't want to go to HR. I'm going to go to someone who he really respects, and hopefully they can help me figure out how to have the conversation. But then this director said, no, I'm his mentor. Let me have that conversation so I can help him develop as a leader. And that for me is a moment of grace where someone's not looking at this from their vantage point. Well, I'm not happy. I'm going to go complain to HR. No, it's I see his potential as a leader. I want to help him grow. So I want to make sure he takes this and gets the feedback in such a way that it empowers him and kind of makes him driven to really achieve that potential I see him in. And that's from my employees. So that was a great moment of grace.
I love that story because it's grace shown to you, but I would say that you had earned that moment of grace because your employees knew that you had their best interests at heart and they wanted to give you some feedback, and that was the way it was done to you. So great story. So unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want you to give you the opportunity. How can people find you, Tanveer? So
best way to find me is on my website at tanveernaseer.com. There you can also find links to my podcast that John was recently on, Leadership Biz Cafe, that's on all the major streaming platforms, Spotify and Apple Podcasts and so forth. So I'd love for you to check that out. Otherwise, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you there as well.
Tanveer, thanks for making time for us today. Your insights into leadership and the gap between perception and reality is so insightful. And I urge people to get a copy of your book, Leadership Vertigo. It'll open a new sense of awareness to help you become more effective. So Tanveer Naseer, thank you very much. So,
John, always a pleasure to speak with you. I really enjoyed our conversation again.